Hi, I'm Kelly with citruscycles.ca. I'm here with Scott's eSub Active Unisex Rack Type. It's a long but descriptive name for this bike. Scott, of course, is the brand. Active refers to the fact that we've got the new Bosch Active line there. Unisex, of course, it's suitable for both men and women. And rack type refers to the fact that they've put the battery on the rear rack to really open up the step-through area here. And that's one of the real highlights of this bike, is it's very comfortable and very safe, really easy to get on and off, of course, because you've got this nice accessible step-through area, fairly low step over height, so really easy to get on and off and a lot of fun to ride. For the detailed specs on this bike, current pricing, or to order online, you can head over to our website at citruscycles.ca. There you'll find our contact information, so if you have any questions or if you'd like to arrange an appointment to come try it here in beautiful Ladysmith, you can find all that information on our website at citruscycles.ca. So as I mentioned, this has actually got the new Bosch Active line, and so you'll notice a difference between it and the previous generation. Bosch has gone to a full-size chainring here instead of the smaller chainring like you find on the previous generation. What that allowed them to do is to remove the reduction gearing inside the motor, and that helped to reduce the weight. The second thing that they did with this new Active line is they were able to decouple the motor when you are coasting, or when you have the assistance off, or when you exceed that 32 kilometers an hour cutoff speed, and that causes there to be no drag at all, no resistance from the motor. So that's a nice new feature that they've added. So that is the Active line. So the new Active line is also available in Active Line Plus. The Active line has the least amount of torque, and that also brings the price down. And so this is a really good value-priced bike, especially for a Bosch-powered bike. You don't see a lot in this price range, so they've done a few things to make it hit that price point. One thing was using the Active line instead of the Active Line Plus. So the Plus has more torque than this one. If here in Ladysmith, for example, we've got some really steep hills. If I were wanting to ride up and down those steep hills all the day long, I would probably go with the Active Line Plus or even the Performance Liner. Ideally, all the bikes I choose to ride with have the Bosch CX, but of course those are more expensive, but they do help me fly right up those hills. So yes, you'll manage up all the hills with this bike, but with the Active line not having as much torque, it's going to take a little bit more work, or it's going to take a little bit more time. Now fortunately, with a mid-drive like the Bosch Active line here, we do take advantage of the mechanical advantage of our gearing here. So when you change gears on the 9-speed Shimano Acera on the back here, that is going to impact on the motor, and that's going to help you climb up the hills. With the rear hub motor, for example, when you change gears, it doesn't have an impact on the motor at all. But here you go up into your first gear, your climbing gear here on that 9-speed Shimano cassette, and that's going to have a direct impact on the motor and help you climb up that hill. The Bosch system is also a really very natural feeling, very responsive. Again, because it's driving the chain, that's how your bike is normally propelled. It feels very natural, and it's a really smooth and I think quieter as well. To control all of that drive system, Scott has gone with the Bosch Purion display. Bosch has two different display styles. They have the Intuvia, which kind of is a removable display, a little bit bigger, goes on the stem here, and can charge a USB device and can also support the Kobe system. They went with the Purion, which is a smaller, more compact display. Again, it's a little bit less expensive than the Intuvia, which may be one of the reasons why they went with that, again, to hit that price point. But it is permanently mounted, so if you're using this for commuting, you don't have to worry about forgetting to remove your display. There is a USB port, but it can't charge a USB device. It's just for diagnostics. But it is really nice and compact and small, and so that allows you to put you know, a mount for your phone or a handlebar bag or any of those things that would be difficult to put on with the Intuvia display there. So, you know, there are some definite advantages to going with this compact Purion display. To turn the bike on, there's a power button right at the top here. Really straightforward, easy to turn on and off. You're not having to first turn the battery on or anything like that. And then you'll have your current speed, and then your battery level, and down here display that'll show you right now, I think, the level of assistance that you're in. And if you get a bike with a Pure-On display, just a little tip for you, it's easier to control the buttons if you press closer to the screen than closer to the edge. So when I press the plus here, you can see it moves up to Eco, which is the lowest level of assist, then moves up to Tour, then we've got Sport, and all the way up to Turbo for the hills. When you press the minus, you can go back down and all the way to off. And when you ride this bike off, it rides just like a regular bike. Because the motor is decoupling, there's no extra resistance. That's something I always suggest to people do when they try an e-bike, is try riding with it off, see how it feels. If it's really difficult to ride, then maybe the motor's hiding the fact that it's not a good bike. But when I've done the ride test with this, with the motor off, it really rode quite well. So you can also change the information that's shown on the bottom here by pressing and holding the minus key. So instead of seeing the level of assistance we're in, I can show the trip distance. And by the way, if I change the level of assistance, it is going to flash for me and then go back to whatever you had selected. So that's really handy. In addition to the trip distance, I can see my total distance, and one of my favorite features of the Bosch system is I can also see my range. And that is dynamic and adjusts as you ride. So right now, it's if I put it on Eco, it's saying with this battery and the last 2 or 3 kilometers you've gone, it's projecting I could go another 76 kilometers. If I move that up to Tour, it's saying, well, now you could probably go 47. Sport will be a little bit less at 37, and putting up to Turbo, of course, is going to definitely reduce my range down to 34 kilometers. That will adjust both as the battery depletes, but also as I ride, and it gets a sense of how you're riding, the type of terrain, whether it's windy, there's hills, and that sort of thing. So that's really handy to have that range calculator. If I press and hold minus again, it goes back to the indicating which level of assistance I'm on. If I want to reset that trip computer, I just press and hold the plus and minus together. It says reset, and now that's reset. So it's really easy to use, very straightforward, nice big buttons, accessible while you're riding. So I really do like the Pure-On display for that feature. To turn your lights on, you press and hold the plus, and now you can see on the display here that it is showing that the lights are active. And one of the things I really like about this is that the lights are built in and they're running off of your main battery. So you don't have to worry about remembering to remove them or put them on or charge them. And we also have a nice bright side cutout here on the front light to keep you safe at night when you're riding with traffic with side visibility. We also have 2 bright LEDs and a reflector in the back light here as well, and they also have a side cutout, or the LEDs mounted on the side, so you can see it from the back and from the side. And Scott's really focused on safety here. They have put reflective sidewalls in the tires as well, which is great. Again, at night gives you that extra visibility. And I do really like these tires. They're the Schwalbe Century. They're a real classic look. I mean, when you look at the bike overall, it's a beautiful looking bike. They've done a really good job designing it with the kind of the brown accents here on the saddle, these brown cushy grips with the leather style stitching, and then coming back to the tire and having that kind of cream sidewall, little brown accents on the fenders. And these are aluminum fenders. That's a nice upgrade. I haven't heard any noise from them. They're quite, they don't flop around like sometimes plastic fenders can do. So it's a really nice, a lot of really nice features that they've selected and yet still made it really affordable. So coming back to these tires, these are 28 by 2 inch tires. You can see it's written in really large letters on there, which is really awesome actually, because the other thing that they do is they put the tire pressure rating in that big lettering. Here we go, 35 to 70 psi. And I can't tell you how often I'm getting my flashlight out and shining it on tire sidewalls to try to figure out, what I'm supposed to have the tire pressure at. So I love that, that's great for me. I can very easily see that. And that's just kind of part of the classic design and styling that they're doing. But it is a nice wide 2 inch wide tire, which I really like. And we've got a very interesting tread pattern here. You can see it's nice and smooth in the middle here for rolling on the road. And if you get into some gravel, you're cornering, some wet, you've got some siping on the sides there to help keep you safe. So I am impressed with these tires. They have some puncture resistance as well as that reflective sidewall, and nice and wide. And really on an e-bike, you might as well have a wide tire because it's going to give you more traction, more support, more stability, and just make you feel safer when you're riding in difficult conditions. So that's nice to have. We've got a kickstand that's actually mounted at the rear here, which means it won't collide with the pedals when they're turning, which is great. We do have a quick release on the rear wheel, and of course we have Shimano hydraulic disc brakes. So these are 160mm rotors, which on a bike like this, for what the bike's going to be used for, is certainly more than adequate. And we have the Shimano brake levers up here. I really like having the hydraulic brakes because it means there's very little maintenance to do, the cable isn't going to stretch or rust or break, and you're not relying on the strength of your hands to stop the bike. You've got the benefit of the hydraulic fluid. Well, we're up here at the top. Scott even includes a flick bell, which is cool. And we've got the Shimano Serra trigger shifters up here with a visual indicator of the gear you're in, which is kind of handy. And as I mentioned, that's a 9-speed. We also have an adjustable stem, so you can get an Allen key, loosen that off, and you can adjust the stem to whatever angle you want. So that's really nice. Again, this is really a comfort-focused bike, so we've got those comfortable grips, and by having the adjustable stem, you can really dial in the ride to meet your requirements. Fairly comfortable saddle here with a fair bit of gel, which is nice, beautiful looking. We've got a quick release here so you can adjust the height as you wish, and again, a nice, really wide step-through area to get on and off the bike. We've got the rack, of course, with the battery on the rear rack, and they did that in order to really open up the step-through area. Had they mounted the battery either on the down tube or the seat tube, that really would have restricted the step-through area. So on the one hand, it's really nice to have that wide open space to get on and off. On the other hand, I prefer not to have the weight of the battery on the rear, but you can see the rack is actually integral to the frame, so that helps with the stiffness of the bike. And often with the step-through, sometimes they tend to be a little bit not very laterally stiff, and that can cause some problems. But by integrating the rack as part of the frame, that really helps stiffens it up and makes sure that, of course, you've got a nice strong mounting point for the battery, which is great. We have both we have two rails here that you can hang bags on. We have pannier blockers so that they're not going to hit your rear wheel. We have a hook mounting spot there for your pannier bag, plus it comes with bungee cords, plus it comes with the spring-loaded clamp here on top as well. So it's really well thought out as far as transporting you know, groceries or going to work, commuting, whatever you're doing. Or, you know, a lot of times with e-bikes, a lot of our customers tend to just go on really long rides, and it's nice to bring your lunch. We've got a key here to remove the battery from the frame, so you just put your key in, turn that, and then there's a carrying handle at the back here. You just slide that towards you. You don't have to remove the battery, however, if you wish to charge it, you can charge it on the frame. There's a charging flap right there, so your choice to charge it on or off the bike. That same key is going to open the cafe lock here. So you put the key in the side here, this lever you push down, and a metal bar comes through, and let's see, I don't think I brought the keys with me to show that to you, but there's a metal bar that's going to come through the rear wheel, lock into the other side here, and that will prevent somebody from riding your bike away. That's a Abus Protectic 4960. So the bike can't be ridden away, and that's why we call it a cafe lock. You know, if you're sitting outside somewhere, we've got an eye on your bike, that's just going to prevent the casualty from riding off with it. And of course, somebody could pick your bike up and put it in the back of a truck. And to that end, Abus does provide a port on this end. And we have a chain that you can actually plug into there and then wrap around a bike rack or whatever it is that you wish to lock it to. And again, we're using the same key. You don't need an additional key or a combination for that. So that's a really nice feature to have that frame lock included. Another nice feature is we've got a full-length chain guard that comes quite a ways down here to protect your pants and the chain when you're riding. And so this is a nice accessible bike because it's so easy to get on and off. You're also not going to have to change clothes or put cycling clothes on in order to ride because you've got that protection there. You also of course have the full-length fenders, and that also is going to help you stay clean when you're riding. We do have a suspension fork up front here. It's a SR Suntour NEX, and it's got a little bit of travel and a little bit of adjustment in terms of rebound that you can make under these covers here. But you know, honestly, most people just leave it the way that it is and ride it. And the benefit of that suspension fork is not only is it going to smooth out the ride and make it a little bit more comfortable when you get through potholes or over curbs or, you know, just difficult terrain. It's also going to help you ride safer, because then you're not necessarily going to feel like you're going to be thrown off your bike and start slowing down and speeding up to avoid obstacles or swerving, and that can make it difficult in traffic. So it gives you a lot more confidence to ride safely, and I like seeing a suspension fork on a bike like this. The pedals are, you know, your typical kind of rubberized pedal here. For most people riding this bike, those are fine pedals. For myself, I usually change pedals to something that's a little bit wider because I ride in the rain and I like to have more grips on there as well. But of course, those touch points are easy to change. You can change the pedals, you can change the saddle. These grips, you either love them or hate them. They're nice because they've got some foam under there, so they actually have a fair bit of compression. Some people don't like the stitching. It looks really great, but they don't like the feel of that. No problem. Grips are, again, really easy to change. Don't choose your bike based on that. But it is a beautiful looking bike. It's well put together, rides well. There's not a lot of changes. Like I said, for where I live, I always try to go with a more powerful Bosch CX drive. But in terms of price and value, it's a great value. The new Active line is really neat the way that it has no resistance. It's fairly quiet, very, very smooth. And altogether, you know, it comes with everything. It's got the rack and the bungee cord and the clamp and the lock and fenders and lights, and you know, so to that end, it's a really great value. If you have any further questions, you want to come try it out, head over to our website at citruscycles.ca. I forgot to mention two things about the bike. It does have walk mode enabled, so when I press and hold the button under here, the bike, see it says walk plus. So now if I press and hold plus, it moves the bike along at about a 4 or 5 km/h walking pace. So all I have to do is steer the bike. I'm not having to push it, and that's really useful if you're in a pedestrian area, especially if you have a lot of weight on the back, or if you're coming off the ferry ramp, they don't like you riding up there, so you can also use that to get you up or by stairs or anything like that. So the walk mode's really handy. The other thing I forgot to point out is this is the Bosch Power Pack 400. That's the 400 watt-hour battery. Bosch does make a 500 watt-hour battery, and they are interchangeable and backwards compatible. So if you wanted to get a spare battery, or you were cycling with a friend who also had the rack type battery, and it does need to be the rack type battery. Obviously the frame type and the rack type are different styles of batteries, but Bosch purposely, when they came up with a 500 watt-hour, made the effort to make it backwards compatible. And that's really great, because if you know you're investing in a bike like this, it's nice to know that you're going to be able to get the support that you need in the future. And it's nice that they have the different option to switch to a different battery size. This is with the new Bosch Active line, and I just transitioned from 32 to 34 kilometers an hour, and that's when the assistance cuts off. Legally in Canada, an e-bike has to stop assisting at 32 kilometers an hour. And one of the interesting things about the new Active line is they've designed it to get rid of the gear reduction and completely decouple once the motor isn't active. So that transition, do it again, is completely seamless. I don't notice at all that the motor is cutting out, other than it becomes a little bit harder to pedal, but there's absolutely no drag or resistance with that. So that's interesting. It's definitely a different feel than, say, the Bosch Performance line or the CX. Certainly that decoupling is nice. It's very smooth. It's definitely not as much torque, of course. And I'm just going to pop it up to sport and then on turbo for the hill here. And I would say it's perhaps not quite as responsive as the performance line in CX, and I'm talking, you know, milliseconds here, but I feel when you stop pedaling, you can feel the motor disengage, and it's almost a little bit of a clunk when it does that. Whereas with the performance line and the CX, you don't feel that. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a different experience. And it's actually pretty easy to get up to speed on this bike. These are wider tires, which is nice for gravel. They seem very efficient. I've been rolling along fairly quickly without too much effort. With the full-size chainring on the active line, it's nice to have that chain guard there. Check my pants. And it's a little bit wet after a few days of rain here in Ladysmith, so I'm grateful for these full coverage fenders. And it is nice that they're aluminum instead of plastic, pretty secure, sturdy, not noisy at all. Every now and then on a big bump I might hear a little bit. And also appreciating this front suspension. As we go over bumps like these, it helps to absorb, smooth things out, and also helps keep you in control over the bike. If I were to own this bike, I would probably add a suspension seat post as well, just to make it a little more comfortable. But the saddle actually is quite comfortable and fairly wide, and that helps a fair bit as well. I do have a bag on the rack with some tools in it, and that's probably the noise that you hear rattling back there. I don't believe it's the bike, I think it's just my bag, so I apologize for that. It is nice having the bungee cords on there, so I was able to put my bag on quite easily. Up that previous hill on turbo, it was quite easy. I'm going to do another hill up here again, and I'll pay more attention to the power. Certainly it, again, doesn't have the power that the CX drive does, but of course it's also lighter and less expensive. It's a really comfortable riding position, nice and upright, gives you good view of traffic, helps you to be seen as well. These grips are quite cushy and quite comfortable. There is a bit of stitching on the other side. Now, they're not locking, so you can easily twist them as you need to in order to position that stitching. But of course, as I always mention on any bike, you can easily change the grips and the saddles and the pedals if they're not to your liking. So I'll put her back up into turbo for this bit of a hill here. It's nice, I do have the visual indicator of the gears there, so I know where I'm at, and I can start gearing down to climb the hill. Alright, so no problem climbing that hill. Put it back down to sport. I was able to click through all of my gears there. Fairly smooth shifts, not the same as what you'd expect with the Shimano Dior. This is the Acera, which is, again, keeping in the price point they were trying to get the bike at. More of an entry to mid-level component group. Works very well, just not quite as smooth. You can hear a little bit of the crunching back there, as with the Dior group set might be. So I'm definitely noticing the power, even on turbo, being a lot more subtle. It's very quiet. I can barely hear the motor. Especially, you know, once you get up to higher speeds. Just going to check for a speed wobble here. That is to make sure that at a lot of times with a step through, there it is, at a certain speed, the front headset will start to shake if your hands are off the handlebars. So it's not a big deal, but you want to make sure that you keep your hands on the handlebars, well, ideally at all times, but especially at those certain speeds. So I think that was somewhere between 30 and 32 that we saw a little bit of a shake there, and all I had to do was then put my hands back on the handlebars. Again, it's not a big deal, but it's something to be aware of, and is frequently occurs on step-throughs because they don't have the lateral stiffness. So on a step-through, it is important that you keep your hands on the handlebars, and that will avoid that sort of problem. And on this particular bike, and I imagine it's different for each of the frame sizes. This is the small. It was somewhere over that 30 kilometers an hour. All right, we'll do one more big long hill climb. Definitely with this active line, it's quiet, it's very subtle, it's very smooth. You know, until I actually turn the assistance off. There we go, now it's off. You don't notice that it's on. And now I'm slowing down in the off. It still is fine, it rides well. Something I always recommend you do is turn the assistance off and test the bike. You can see with it off, my speedometer is still working here, but I'm going to put it back on, move it up to sport, and yeah, it's really very smooth. Obviously I'm going faster now, and it's a lot easier, but you almost don't notice the assistance. It's not jerky at all. It doesn't give you that push that sometimes you might feel on other drive units. I have been able to multi-shift when downshifting using the trigger shifter here, which is nice. You can shift multiple gears at once. Put her up into turbo. I should mention on that section of the road there by the art gallery where we had the gravel and the potholes, these tires handled really well. I like having wider tires when I'm planning on going on to gravel trails and that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm hovering 10, 12 kilometers an hour up the hill. So yeah, I can make it up, no problem. I'm in my easiest gear. I'll do one more climb. And you know, definitely I'm noticing the difference between the CX drive, which I usually have a bike that I usually ride with it, and with it I'd be flying up this hill at a lot faster pace and with less work, but I'm still making it up. So with the active line, it's certainly possible. You're just going to be a little bit slower, unless you want to go faster and put more work in yourself. Right now I'm just putting a moderate amount of work in, and you can see as I do that, kind of dropping down. If you're not able to put in more than a moderate amount, or if even a moderate amount is too much for you, maybe due to an injury or something like that, and you've got a lot of big hills like that, then I would suggest going with the bike with the Bosch CX instead. But if you want to get some exercise, or don't mind going slower, putting a little bit of work in, or you don't have hills like we have in Ladysmith, then the active line on this Scott bike works quite well. And we'll give the brakes a test here. Going down the hill. These are Shimano hydraulic disc brakes, which is great to have on an e-bike. No problem stopping, and you can see, I don't know if the GPS will be very accurate, but I hit about 50 kilometers an hour coming down that hill, and with my hands on the handlebars, of course, I had no concerns. I didn't feel wobbly at all or unsafe. certainly these nice wide tires help contribute to that feeling of stability. And you're probably on a bike like this aren't going to be exceeding 50 kilometers an hour that frequently. This is more of a touring, commuting, city, light trail kind of bike. Well, I think I've given a good idea of the bike and its features. It's very comfortable. That Bosch Active line is very smooth but still capable for the hills. Nice upright riding position. If you have any questions or if you'd like to come try it yourself, head on over to our website at citruscycles.ca.